Dear friends, I welcome you to my channel. I am Taras Berezovets. Today we will discuss the mysterious chain of diversions and the flights of unknown drones, which indeed covered the largest American air base on the territory of the United Kingdom. The Bundeswehr stated that a Russian connection in the crash of the DHL cargo plane in Vilnius is very likely. In fact, we have arrived at the version that was the most realistic from the very beginning. That this is not a man-made disaster, not a human factor, not a technological factor, but rather a diversion. And this version is now being favored, I repeat, by representatives of the German Ministry of Defense. The Financial Times reported that the third Chinese Defense Minister, Dong Jun, has become a subject of an anti-corruption investigation. Previously, they lost. Two of his predecessors were repressed from their positions. Naturally, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs denied all this as false Western propaganda. Well, that's just how they are. However, after some time, he may be found somewhere in a psychiatric hospital, or he will mysteriously die from a sudden, completely unexpected heart attack. Well, coincidences like that happen. For example, the Polish minister proposes to create a special naval police in the Baltic Sea to stop Russian diversions. Meanwhile, the policy reported that the Biden administration is a mystery. Indeed, it's interesting how it's a mystery. Every time you write in the comments, what kind of mystery is it if leading world publications are writing about it? I can also ask you this question, is it really a mystery? However, the policy claims that the White House requested another $24 billion from Congress for Ukraine, and mainly this will go towards purchasing weapons to replenish American stocks. In other words, this is assistance, so to speak, that will be compensated. This is not the kind of assistance which will directly go to the Ukrainian troops. The head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, General Budanov, reported that Russia used during shelling Russian aircraft that were received from the Ukrainian government in 1999. In 1999, it concerns the Tu-160, which became a consequence of treasonous anti-state decisions brought about by corruption, incompetence, and a lack of strategic vision. This statement already leans towards political. Another very close person from Putin's circle indeed threatens the West to seriously turn it into nuclear ashes. This time it is oligarch Mikhail Kovalchuk. Well, basically nothing new. The example of Slovakia, Fico will indeed arrive in Moscow for the victory parade on May 9th. This became known today. Before that, he humbly requested an invitation for himself. And even then, propaganda media reported that he will definitely be invited. The leading French publication Le Monde reports that Ukraine, with the help of the latest electronic warfare systems, intercepts Russian Shaheds and redirects them to Belarus and the Russian Federation. It turns out to be a kind of Shahed Aikido. That is, all this crap, is then filled with explosives and flies not towards peaceful Ukrainian cities, but back to where it all took off from. And finally, Russia is gathering forces at the Kinburn Spit to prevent the crossing of the Dnieper. This was stated by the Southern Defense Forces. At the same time, this may indicate preparations for the opponents to launch actions against them. Well, actually, representatives of the Southern Forces reported this. And today, there were active strikes on the temporarily occupied Crimea. Because of this, alarms were declared there all morning. Friends, we will talk about all this later. So, a whole group of unknown drones is terrorizing American military bases located in the territory of the United Kingdom. We are talking about the Royal Air Force bases in Lakenheath, Mildenhall, and Feltwell. In particular, Lakenheath is home to the only fourth and fifth generation jet fighter of the United States Air Force in Europe, while Mildenhall hosts a squadron of American fueling aircraft. The first drones over the Royal Air Force bases, where American aviation is stationed, were spotted on November 20th and again on the 25th. For now, as the Wall Street Journal reports, it is unknown who was operating these very drones. We also do not know. Well, I think we can guess with a greater degree of certainty. We know the answer to who was behind this. Who are these scoundrels and pranksters? Sending drones to monitor American military bases. Well, it's definitely not kids. Definitely not teenagers. as this poses administrative and even criminal liability in the United Kingdom. Therefore, it is most likely representatives of Russian special services who can play such games as similar attempts at surveillance, which, by the way, were never investigated. Rather, they were investigated but without results, did not determine who was behind them, occurred over the Bundeswehr Air Force bases in Germany. Well, at that time, they also wondered who could be monitoring the Air Force bases in Germany, who these scoundrels were, these unknown scoundrels, who they were, with balalaikas and in fur coats and with a bottle of vodka under their arm. Who are these scoundrels? Meanwhile, a representative of the U.S. Air Force Command in Europe confirmed that drones had been spotted, which did not affect the residents and infrastructure, and were not identified as hostile. Well, that is to say, they did not carry out an attack. Thank God these were not FPV drones. For now, I will emphasize once again, well, it is obvious that the investigation is not yielding any concrete results so far. This is handled by a whole special unit of the Air Force, not the police. This is handled by a special unit of the British Air Force that deals with drone combat. It is engaged in investigations. They use, in particular, equipment for tracking and jamming drones. By the way, I would like to remind you that in Germany, the attempt to jam them led to nothing. They also used electronic warfare systems. For some mysterious reason, it did not work. Either the electronic warfare systems were of poor quality, or the drones were insensitive to the electronic warfare systems that were used against them. The Bundeswehr. Meanwhile, representatives of British intelligence warn that Russia has intensified its sabotage activities across Europe. In particular, the main intelligence directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation is aimed at creating chaos on British and European streets. Dangerous actions are being carried out with increasing recklessness. This has already been reported by Ken McCallum, the Director General of the MI5 Internal Security Service. I will repeat once again, let's hope that the British intelligence services are traditionally more professional than their European colleagues, particularly the Germans, and I believe they should get to the truth and establish who, I will repeat once again, these scoundrels are. Those running around in traditional Russian shirts with balalaikas are now launching drones at the bases of the Royal Air Force of the United Kingdom. Who are they? Meanwhile, the publication Die Welt cites the words of the Inspector General of the Bundeswehr, Carsten Breuer, stating that the crash of a cargo plane of the German company DHL in Lithuania may be a test by Georgia to identify weaknesses in defense. According to the Inspector General of the Bundeswehr, Putin is creating a situation where it is not quite peace, but not quite war either. I would like to remind you that a Boeing 737-800 owned by DHL crashed on Monday near Vilnius airport. One crew member was killed. 4 other people were also unfortunately injured in total. Earlier, sources from the Times of New York warned that Russia is planning to organize a large number of diversions in Europe, in response to granting permission for the armed forces of Ukraine to strike Russian military facilities on the territory of the Russian Federation. Sources from the Wall Street Journal indicated that if one of the diversions by Russian special services ultimately leads to an aviation disaster, it will result in a serious military escalation between NATO and Russia. It was assumed that the arsons that occurred in warehouses in Germany, particularly in Leipzig and in the UK, involved flammable substances that were disguised as household appliances. These were hair dryers. They could catch fire during the flight. If this happened during a transatlantic flight, then the planes would face crash in the Atlantic Ocean. Well, naturally, all crew members and accompanying DHL staff would not survive in such a case. I would like to draw attention, first of all, to the fact that this flight was from Leipzig to Vilnius, while the packages that previously caught fire in warehouses in Germany and Britain were actually first handed over to DHL for shipment to Lithuania. Lithuania is becoming a target for Russian diversions. This is not accidental, as Lithuania is the largest state in the Baltics, one of the most active supporters of providing military aid to Ukraine, and one of the most effective. And therefore, naturally, it is likely that, with a high degree of probability, let's say in a hypothetical sense, although I am almost certain of this, it will now be the focus of the main subversive actions. Russian special services have decided to target Lithuania specifically, so we must be prepared for new acts of sabotage, diversions, and possibly even political assassinations. Meanwhile, in Lithuania itself, Defense Minister Laurynas Kasčiūnas stated that Lithuania has not yet found signs that the cause of the DHL cargo plane crash was sabotage, and still considers the main version to be technical problems. This became known today. A visual analysis, as stated by the Minister of Defense of Lithuania, showed that there was no external impact on the aircraft. Conversations with the surviving crew members indicate that there was no chaos or concern on board before the crash. There was also no smoke or fire recorded. But I will repeat, this is still a preliminary version. We see that in the Bundeswehr they think differently. Meanwhile, a new corruption scandal in the Ministry of Defense of China, the third in a row, has made the Chinese defense minister the subject of an anti-corruption investigation. Dun Zun, who took over the post in December 2023, after his predecessor Le Dun Zun took over the post. Li Shangfu was also stripped of his general rank, all awards, and accused of corruption. Before Li Shangfu, the position of Minister of Defense was also lost by Wei Fenghe, due to corruption charges. Both Wei Fenghe and Li Shangfu were also expelled from the Communist Party. They were stripped of their general ranks and all awards. As we know, purges are being conducted in the Ministry of Defense. We see that Xi Jinping is cleaning up, obviously due to the corruption that has engulfed the top leadership of the Ministry of Defense and the People's Liberation Army of China. May also be related to the elimination of rivals. In the case of Li Shangfu, there was indeed a version that he was too influential, and he acquired a wide circle of acquaintances, as is often the case. He became, as they say, entangled in godfather-like connections in Communist Party and military circles. This could have been the reason for his downfall. In the case of Jun Jun, it is difficult to assume something similar for now. He was not as public as Li Shangfu. Practically nothing was known about him. Apparently, he decided to take into account the experience of his predecessors, choosing not to stand out too much. To avoid provoking jealousy from the leadership, the head of the Communist Party, President of China Xi Jinping, but in the end, it did help him. This is information from the Financial Times and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China, by the way. Why it and not the Ministry of Defense, which would be logical, already raises certain suspicions. Naturally, it's said that this is all false Western propaganda, and the Chinese embassy in Washington also declined to comment. As they say, there is no smoke without fire. In this case, as we can see, there are undoubtedly some problems with Dong Jun. Whether it will end in his downfall, or if he will get away with some disciplinary actions, we will find out soon. But I will repeat once again, there is a high probability that the information from the Financial Times is indeed true. Meanwhile, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk proposed that the countries of Northern Europe, as well as the Baltics, reach an agreement on the establishment of a naval police in the Baltic Sea. To name it, Baltic Air Policing, or abbreviated as BAP. It should be responsible for the constant monitoring of the airspace over the Baltic countries. That is, this police has already been established, and he proposes to create a similar police now within the framework of the naval forces. This decision was made by the Prime Minister of Poland after two incidents involving the sabotage of two telecommunications cables that connected Lithuania, Sweden, Finland, and Germany. Meanwhile, the chairman of the Marine Board of the Russian Federation and former Secretary of the Security Council, Nikolai Patrushev, stated that Western countries are trying to deprive Russia of access to the Baltic Sea and turn it into a NATO internal lake. He primarily blamed the leadership of Sweden and Finland for this. Russia is indeed behaving extremely aggressively and provocatively, and in response the countries of the region will have to primarily rely on themselves. And traditionally, they should of course be helped by Great Britain, which, as always, is on, I repeat, the front line in the fight against Moscow's agents. Regarding the Germans, I repeat, the Bundeswehr, considering its sad current state, well, let's say, it is a collapse of the military machine. We saw disgraceful information that only a third of the TU missiles are ready for use. In other words, these are all outrageous scandals. Inflated contracts for the supply of armored vehicles by the Bundeswehr. In short, everything there is currently in such a terrible state that unfortunately one cannot rely on the military forces of Germany. Well, in the case of Britain, the key problem is the sharp reduction. The least, I repeat, I recently talked about this, the smallest number of the Royal Armed Forces, the Land Army, the smallest Little Britain since the year 1700, That is, over the last 320 years, this is the smallest land army currently in Britain. And they themselves understand that they urgently need to take action on recruitment, and there are also problems with that. Young people, young Britons, do not want to serve in the army. Meanwhile, the acting president of the United States, Joe Biden, secretly requested $24 billion from Congress for additional aid to Ukraine. For the supply of weapons, as reported by the publication Politica, $16 billion will be allocated to replenish the Pentagon's stock of American weapons. That is, the Pentagon's warehouses simply need to be replenished. And $8 billion is proposed to be allocated for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. As part of it, the U.S. Department of Defense enters into contracts with manufacturers who provide equipment and weapons directly from the warehouses. The details of the proposal were reported by two assistants to American congressmen. Congress received the relevant proposal on Monday. The reaction of the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump. His representatives were not present, but we can imagine what they would say about this. Earlier, Trump repeatedly expressed support for reducing spending on military aid to Ukraine primarily. Well, Trump will obviously be annoyed that he has such an expression, steal their show. Biden stole the show from Trump. The day before, he arranged for the governments of Israel and Lebanon to conclude a ceasefire, i.e., in a significant development, Hezbollah, the powerful Shiite militant group and political party based in Lebanon, has successfully negotiated and concluded a ceasefire agreement with the Lebanese government. This agreement comes after months of escalating tensions and sporadic clashes that have affected the region's stability. He made significant efforts towards this, even already naming his candidacy for the position of the new ambassador to the State of Israel. This whole story, of course, should not please him, at least. Well, we'll see, I repeat, what the comments will be. I think they won't work. They are optimistic regarding Biden's intention to allocate $24 billion. Well, perhaps Trump himself won't comment, but representatives of his so-called transition team will do so. Finally, another loud statement was made on his Telegram channel by the head of the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Kirill Budanov. He commented on the investigation of the Radio Free Europe project and stated that Russia's use of Ukrainian Tu-160 aircraft during shelling of Ukrainian cities was a result of, I quote, an anti-state decision caused by corruption, incompetence, and a lack of strategic vision. We, as a strange nation that pays an extremely high price in the fight for our own freedom, have no right to allow the repetition of such mistakes and crimes. He commented on the investigation of the project scheme, which was previously made public, stating that at least 6 transferred Tu-160 aircraft were handed over by Valery Pustovoykin's government in 1999 in exchange for the repayment of debt for Russian gas. Now they are used for shelling Ukrainian territory. We are talking about bombers. Board number 10, Nikolai Kuznetsov. Board number 11, Vasily Sinko. Board number 12, Alexander Novikov. Board number 15, Vladimir Sudets. Board number 16, Alexei Plokov. Board number 18, Andrei Tupolev. Board number 22, Igor Sikorsky. 3 aircraft, Tu-95MS. 16, Alexei Plokov. 18, Andrei Tupolev. And 22, Igor Sikorsky. Additionally, 3 aircraft were discovered, Tu-95MS, Krasnoyarsk, Sevastopol and Izborsk, the new names of Ukrainian bombers in the composition of the Russian aerospace forces. In August 2023, the schemes reported that Russia is also shelling Ukraine with cruise missiles that were transferred to Ukraine and Russia under an intergovernmental agreement in 1999. At that time, Pustovodenko was the head, the government, I will repeat, and Putin signed from the Russian side. This story made a noise back then. And now we see a statement that was commented on by Budanov. And obviously this is not the last revelation nor the final result of the investigation. But, I will repeat, attention is drawn to the fact that Budanov is already giving political assessments here. And this is the main important point to pay attention to in his words. Meanwhile, another close friend of Putin, the president of the National Research Center Kurchatov Institute, Mikhail Kovalchuk, again threatens that Russia is the only country in the world that can turn the USA into nuclear ashes. And Washington has taken this well. They understand that only we can turn America into nuclear ashes. In this sense, we have a security guarantee. But we need to think about what to do tomorrow. Well, maybe, I don't know, Kovalchuk, know nothing about his alcohol preferences. It seems that Dmitry Medvedev is a solitary alcoholic. He is unlikely to drink with Kovalchuk, as this character Medvedev is too fallen. Probably no one would want to drink, especially an oligarch, but the statement is very strange. Moreover, Medvedev himself recently disavowed his threat, saying that we are not crazy, and no one in the Russian leadership intends to unleash a nuclear war. Well, something obviously went wrong. Another toxic character, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, stated that he received a personal invitation from Putin to visit Moscow on May 9, 2025, when Russia will celebrate the 80th anniversary of victory over Germany in World War II. Fico himself stated that he gladly accepted this offer. Invitation? Well, I suppose we will also see Viktor Orban there, possibly not just him. If the elections in Romania end well, then maybe a new president will also go there. Well, I think the leadership of Georgia must be there. They have scheduled elections which, however, the opposition has called illegal. The new representative, the new favorite of the Georgian Dream Party, is football player Mikhail Kavilashvili, a former player of the Georgian national football team, and the champion of Russia as part of the Spartak Alania team from Vladikavkaz. This wonderful candidate previously accused the US Embassy and Western countries of using agents to divide society in Georgia and of an illegal change of power in Georgia. He is one of the authors of the controversial law on foreign agents. We will probably also see him in Red Square if he wins these illegal elections. Of course. The French publication Le Monde reported that Ukraine, using the latest electronic warfare systems, is altering the coordinates in Russian Shaheds and sending them back home to the Russian Federation, as well as to Belarus. It is reported that a significant number, well, we see this from the reports, including when there was a mass attack of 188 Shaheds, 76 drones were destroyed using kinetic means, and 95 were neutralized, thanks to electronic warfare systems. Well, and as expected, a certain number returned back. It is reported that on November 24th, at least 38 Russian kamikaze drones of the Shahed type flew into Belarus. Well, as they say, fly doves fly, your homeland is waiting for you. Finally, the Russian occupation forces are accumulating strength in the Kinburn-Spit area, which is part of Mykolaiv Oblast, occupied since 2022, to hold the defense and prevent Ukrainian defense forces from crossing the Dnieper. However, as stated by the spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces, Colonel Vladislav Voloshin, the occupiers are training in small infantry groups as part of a detachment from the Dnieper flotilla, currently attempting assault actions in small infantry groups. This accumulation can also indicate attempts at crossing. Now, the occupiers are uncertain about what the situation will be like moving forward. We will continue to observe. Friends, thank you for watching this video. Take care of yourselves, like, share, comment on the broadcast, and don't forget to recommend the video to friends and acquaintances. Glory to Ukraine, Ukrainian Armed Forces, Ukrainian Special Ops, Ukrainian Territorial Defense. Take care. Major Taras Berezovets of the Ukrainian Army. Until we meet again, goodbye.